started now.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you guys so much for joining us for our webinar today to talk about the report that was released in December about the state of career technical education based on increasing access to industry experts in high schools. Today for this panel, you have me. My name is Ashley McFadden. I'm the State Policy Manager with Advance CTE. We're also joined by Catherine Jacques, who's a researcher with the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders with the American Institutes for Research, and Rich Cott, who is the State CTE Director in Nebraska. So I am going to turn it over to Catherine right now to start us out.
Thanks, Ashley. So let's start us out by talking a little bit about why we decided to put this report together. So one of the main reasons for this report has been the increase in attention on this topic that we've seen over the last several years. The work that laid the foundation for the New Skills for Youth grant, which also helped to fund this report, has often highlighted the importance of CTE educators and industry experts broadly, ensuring that students are prepared for post-secondary opportunities, career. We've heard this referred to in the past as college and career readiness. Now I think we're starting to look at opportunities after high school in general. We've really reached a point in the conversation where there's a lot of consensus among national leaders on the importance of all students having access to high-quality, career-relevant instruction that's delivered by knowledgeable industry experts. So obviously this is a big priority in part because we recognize that not all students have these opportunities. So to reach this goal, we might need to start to shift how we think about how we recruit, train, and support educators that can deliver this type of instruction. We might need to rethink what roles industry experts might take in helping ensure that students have access to these opportunities consistently. So we know that schools often rely on CTE teachers to deliver the career-relevant instruction that's integrated with or aligned to academic instruction. And across most schools, career exploration, career development, that happens primarily in CTE classrooms and CTE experiences. Students really rely on CTE teachers for career-relevant instruction and for career guidance. The past few years, state and local leaders have consistently shared with us that they have challenges around recruiting, retaining, and supporting CTE educators, and makes it really difficult to fulfill these priorities around providing high-quality, career-relevant instruction when they're fighting just to make sure that they have teachers to just teach courses. A lot of times you have new CTE teachers coming in who also need a lot of support in thinking about how they can provide the right kind of instruction to students. Not just the anecdotal conversations that we've had for the past several years, every spring, Advance CTE has a meeting with all of the state CTE directors across the country, and they ask them what their top successes and challenges are. For the past several years, of the top challenges, the top 3 challenges has been recruiting, retaining, and supporting CTE teachers. Even back in 2009, Advanced CTE issued a brief on CTE teacher shortages. We've seen efforts to address this issue, and we've seen a lot of successes in helping to make ground here. But this is still a big problem. There's a lot of major hurdles in having enough highly qualified, effective CTE teachers in many states and many districts across the country. So one thing we want to note, too, is in our survey, which Ashley is going to talk about in a few minutes, 100% of our respondents said that they expect that addressing CTE teacher shortages and improving students' access to industry experts is going to become an increasingly large priority in the future. So these conversations aren't just happening at the state education agency or a governor's office. These conversations have started to be picked up as topics by news organizations across the country. We're seeing these headlines pop up in lots of local newspapers and in major education journals. So as there are these efforts to strengthen career pathways and strengthen CTE, and they've gained attention at the national level, there have been a lot of news stories that have started to highlight this challenge of having enough qualified, knowledgeable CE instructors and industry experts working in secondary schools to the demand. Now, there isn't any real hard data on the exact short of CTE teachers across states, and part of why today we're really focusing on what state and local CTE directors have to actually say about this issue. So before we jump into the results of our survey, we want to talk about who are industry experts. When we talk about, CTE teachers, we know that there are people who have industry background who are working as CTE teachers in high schools primarily. So when we talk about industry experts, who are we talking about? In general, we're talking about individuals who have substantial industry knowledge and experience and the knowledge, skills, abilities necessary to support students in gaining these skills. Also, those who are able to collaborate with others. Now, these experts might work in a variety of roles. So they might be full-time, they might be part-time, they might be adjunct, they might be career advisors or counselors. They might be faculty who work at a post-secondary level who come and either teach courses at a high school, or maybe students part of a dual enrollment program where high school students are able to go and take courses at a local 2- or 4-year college. Industry experts can serve as mentors or career coaches, helping students to find the right sorts of career or pathways that fit their interests and skills. Oftentimes, they also be advisors for career and technical organizations. The important distinction that we want to make is that experts who serve as full-time teachers, that's typically their full-time job. So these other roles can really be beneficial and helpful because they still allow students to have access to and experience with industry experts. But if you look at the time commitment, there are lots of different roles that industry experts can make that are part-time or a smaller time commitment, where they're still able to keep a job in industry. That allows them more flexibility. It allows them to support student learning in their field without having to change their career. And it can also help to ensure that they're staying abreast of all of the new changes and at some fields, new technologies that are emerging. So when we talk about industry experts, we're talking about not just full-time teachers, but the whole breadth of the roles that these experts can take. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Ashley, who can tell you more about our survey results. So Ashley, I'm passing the ball to you now.
Thanks. All right, so given what we know and what we learned about the level of challenge and the level of priority with this issue, we decided to go ahead and take a deeper look, as Catherine mentioned. So Advance CTE, in partnership with AIR, conducted 2 surveys. One survey surveyed 47 state CTE directors. Another surveyed 260 local CTE teachers and administrators from across 26 states. In order to learn more about the strategies that were being used at both the state and the local level, and the challenges that they were facing at both levels, we also conducted a separate literature review. So the survey and related literature review revealed some key trends. First, this is definitely an emerging area of study. There's not a lot of research or information available outside of the full-time alternative certification policies that Catherine mentioned. Again, asked about their overall success rates, it's clear that states aren't seeing the success they'd like to with such a high priority issue. So there's definitely space and appetite for new innovations to solve this problem. There's a disconnect between what state and local leaders are doing to solve this challenge based on our survey. Many district leaders indicated a lack of knowledge of what state leaders were doing. I think it can be attributed to not just a lack of communication, but really a lack of clarity around roles. So even if states are doing quite a bit in this area, the district leaders aren't always aware of it. And we really found that to address this challenge, we require a cohesive overall strategy that combines several policies and actions and goes beyond the more traditional full-time alternative certification policies. So now dive into some of the data from the survey. The first strategy or policy that many people go to when they're thinking about recruiting industry experts is full-time alternative certification. 80% of state directors who responded to the survey reported using some form of alternative certification policy to allow industry experts to become full-time teachers, with the design of the policies differing across states. Generally, states offer these full-time certification pathways for CTE teachers coming from industry and allow them to use work experience or credential attainment to waive certain education requirements. One example, in South Dakota, individuals that are wishing to teach CTE courses can qualify for a 2-year license if they hold an associate's degree, have at least 4,000 hours of work experience, or hold a nationally recognized certification in their field. Once hired, the individuals join a mentorship program, they participate in a professional learning community, and they receive professional development on classroom instruction. CTE in South Dakota are also eligible to earn specific career pathway and career cluster endorsements, which allow them to teach more advanced coursework within their subject area. It is a great example of an alternative certification policy that's not just about the policy itself, but some other supports. As you saw, those who believed their alternative certification policies were majorly successful, that 24% you see on the slide. Only 2 of the states actually reported major success with their state's overall strategy, which suggests to us that alternative certification was not a sufficient solution to this challenge on its own. These policies may be effective for removing barriers for experts that are already looking for full-time opportunities in the classroom. They do little to attract those who had not previously considered entering the teaching profession, or for those who are unprepared to leave their positions in their industry. Full-time alternative certification carries its own challenges related to instructor quality, as teachers who go through that alternative process by definition are beginning with less educator preparation than other candidates. So states who do employ this strategy really need to maintain a delicate balance between flexibility and quality in hiring practices. Conclusions about full-time alternative certification policies, we've given some other policy levers that states are using, including allowing industry experts to serve as part-time teachers, as teachers, or in non-instructional roles. Over states reported having policies that certify industry experts to teach only part-time, similar to, say, an adjunct faculty position in a post-secondary situation. However, many of the states, this option is built in only as a midway point for more traditional alternative certification programs. So in those states, experts can earn part-time teaching licenses, but only while they work to complete the rest of the coursework required for full alternative certification. 1% of states have initiatives underway to recruit industry experts as co-teachers, where the experts work alongside a certified teacher of record. And then more than 55% of state respondents stated that they're engaged in initiatives to recruit industry experts into other roles. It's career advisors, mentors, guest speakers. So for states, this involves using their local advisory boards as a source for those guest speakers and mentors. So for those that do employ these strategies, over half claim at least moderate success with their use, and we actually predict that the success will grow as states continue to explore options and incorporate these policies more deliberately, and as they incorporate them separate from their full-time alternative certification policies. So allowing part-time teaching and co-teaching certification as certifications within themselves for those options. These strategies allow both the states and the industry experts more flexibility. When they're used as part of an overall strategy, they can help fill some of those gaps we mentioned with full-time alternative certification policies. Compared to various certification policies we just discussed, very few states cited incentives as a strategy they used, which might be surprising given the number of states that tend to cite funding or lack of funding as a barrier in this issue. So fewer than 15% of states actually said that they use financial incentives to recruit experts in industry, and only 7% reported using incentives given to employers to donate their employees' time for mentorship, instruction, or advising. So Tennessee is one state that uses incentive strategies. One of their policies allows industry experts to have years of industry experience count as years of teaching experience for salary purposes. So it can enter the teaching profession at a higher salary than they would as standard new teachers. which hopefully will allow their salary level to come closer to what that expert made in their prior position. Of the states that do use incentive policies, the results on those were pretty mixed, with none of the states claiming that their strategy was majorly successful. Even if they are able to put policies in place that reward industry experts with higher salaries than those of entry-level teachers, they still may not be able to reach the level that some industries pay. Additionally, financial and other incentives, whether they be to individuals or to their employers, do not necessarily make up for the other requirements of a transition from industry to education, which includes, again, that required coursework and training. Finally, if not paired with an appropriate outreach effort, those may exist, but they may go underused if people won't be aware of them. Many states responded that they use post-secondary strategies and use post-secondary relationships as a way to increase access to industry experts who may be working as faculty at post-secondary institutions. For example, North Carolina has their dual enrollment initiative called Career College Promise, which allows community colleges and secondary education facilities to share faculty and some resources. However, it's unclear from our overall survey responses if most of the states are using these post-secondary relationships specifically to increase access to industry experts, or if access to these industry experts is actually just a byproduct of some of the other initiatives. So if these articulation agreements might already be in place, it's unclear if states are actually using them to deliberately increase access to experts. And we think this represents an opportunity for any states with dual credit and articulation agreements in place to partnerships with a deliberate objective of providing secondary students with increased access to experts teaching in the post-secondary field. This shared expertise could be an effective strategy for rural regions or other areas that lack available experts at either level of education. This is depending on what agreements are in place with post-secondary institutions as well as with any teacher and faculty unions. So all of this data, we developed a few conclusions about this challenge. First, no single policy will completely address this shortage, and multiple policies must be coordinated together in order to actually affect program design and implementation. States a cohesive set of strategies that align with a clear vision. So our first recommendation is exactly that, to set vision and goals and determine a baseline for your the actual need of how many experts you need, how many students currently have access to experts, etc. A set of strategies should really be a mix of multiple policies and initiatives based on a state or a district's unique context, their goals, and again, their level of need. It should include expanding certification policies to facilitate part-time and co-teaching licenses. In addition to that full-time alternative certification that we discussed, it might also include developing and championing programs and initiatives that clear opportunities for industry experts to fill non-instructional roles, again, as mentors or coaches. It will include, as we said, formalizing agreements with post-secondary institutions that dedicate post-secondary faculty with industry expertise to teach dual enrollment programs. Recommend that states more deliberately engage with employers to increase their awareness of these opportunities, either employers or for their employees. Recommendation is to establish policies to collect and interpret data related to industry experts to really see the size of the challenge. Speaking to our earlier point on the state and district roles, really working to align and clarify what those roles are and communicate them to each other and to employers. This is not just about setting policy, although removing policy barriers is definitely important. States must also provide guidance to districts and employers about what is possible. For another recommendation, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
So, and as Ashley said, it's really important to have a multi-pronged strategy when they're looking to, when states and districts are looking to increase the number of industry experts that you have access to. It's good to look at, strategies we can use to increase the number of full CTE teachers, part-time CTE teachers, and then also what other innovative roles can we offer to industry experts that may not be ready to change careers, where they can still have a high impact on student learning and really help to share some of their expertise with students who are interested in their field. One way to find out whether the strategies that you've chosen are effective is to, at the beginning of your planning, adopt a model of continuous improvement. So what this really means is similar to what Ashley said about gathering a baseline data. You may try strategies and they might be somewhat successful. You may try strategies and find that they're not as successful as you hoped. Where you're implementing a new plan, it's always a good idea to promote this continuous improvement design, so that as you implement, you can look at, well, what's working and what's not, and course correct. Because this is an issue that, being multi-pronged, might take some finessing. So we want to offer a couple of recommendations for how you can do this. One is engaging local stakeholders. This isn't just good for building buy-in for whatever strategies you might want to implement and helping build awareness about this issue. It also is a great way to leverage knowledge that teachers, administrators, and others in the community have around what implementation hurdles might be. What are some good ideas that they have? That's a nice way of helping to make implementation go easier by hearing from the people who will have to be implementing directly what would help them implement these strategies better. It's also good to think about what are the ways that you're going to gather information over time. So for our report, we gave out a survey. You can certainly use free survey software to have informal information gathering surveys. You can also gather anecdotal feedback through informal focus groups. That doesn't have to be something that necessarily stands up to rigorous research methods. Use it just for some information gathering to see how things are going. There's also a lot of data that you might have at your fingertips on teacher mobility, teacher performance, student enrollment, student performance, that will help you see, okay, are we increasing the numbers and reducing teacher turnover? Are students enrolling in these programs? Are students staying in these programs? Especially in larger districts or at the state level, over time, data might really help to show whether these strategies are working or not. One other opportunity that we just want to highlight today, because it's new, there's a new federal grant that was released pretty recently. It's called the Education, Innovation, and Research Program. And what it basically is an opportunity for districts to partner with a research organization. They can study and look at the success over time of their efforts to promote student post-secondary preparedness. So if you're enacting some strategies and you think that this might fit with that, might be an opportunity for some funding to study the success and implementation of your strategies over time. So that, I would like to pass things over to Rich Cott. He's the State CTE Director from Nebraska. And I'll let him introduce himself more. But one of the reasons that we were really glad to have Rich with us today is that Nebraska is one of the very few states that we heard through our research that said that they've been very successful with the strategies that they've used to help increase access to experts. But they've also really worked to implement a very cohesive set of strategies that address this issue. So I'm excited to hear from him, and with that, I'd like to turn over to Rich.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, wherever. Thanks for the opportunity to share a couple of things that we've been doing in the state of Nebraska. As has been stated, we started this a few years ago and really recognized the fact that we needed a multifaceted approach to deal with some of our issues. So next slide, please. The challenge we have in Nebraska is probably not unique to some of the larger rural states. First of all, we have a teacher shortage looming, especially in skilled and technical sciences or industrial education. That That's our ultimate shortfall area. We're always very tight or short in agriculture and some of the other areas, but skilled technical sciences is in particular a soft spot for us. What makes Nebraska's challenge a little bit unique is where our population density is. If you notice on the Nebraska map, that red line that runs up and down the page hits just to the east of Lincoln, Nebraska. Half of our state's population live between that line and the Missouri River. So basically within 50 miles of the Missouri River, we have 50% of our population. That leaves about 450 miles for the rest of us to live, including those of us in Lincoln. The other unique thing is that that big circle, and you'll see the word Sand Hills printed in the middle of that circle, that's some of the richest and meadowland in the world because it sits on top of the Ogallala Aquifer. So it's great cattle country. We have a lot of counties out there where there are literally more cattle than there are people. So you have a population density issue. Also complicated that is the I-80 corridor, which of course anytime you have an interstate running through your state, you tend to see more development and more industry along that corridor. So the corridor, not so good for the rest of the state. So as we started to think about how we were going to serve the state, one of our mantras is the fact that for students in the state of Nebraska, your zip code should not determine the quality of the education that you receive, especially in career and technical education. So we've been trying to figure out and look at multiple strategies to address our teacher shortage, as well as the idea of how do we get the industry experts that are really found dominantly in the eastern part of the state or along the I-80 corridor to have access, so students have access to them no matter where they live in the state of Nebraska. Solutions on the next slide. With our teacher shortage, we have three strategies that we've really worked with. First one is our career education teaching permit. This one allows an individual who has an industry background to come to a school and to teach in that area. It's a little bit unique. It's only good for grades 9 through 12 in the area of their specialization, and the permit is actually granted to the school district to hire that individual. So it's not something that an individual can get and then go out and market themselves. Rather, it's where the school has identified a shortage area or a need for a specific skill set in a teacher, and they have found an individual, and then we work through the permit from that perspective. The individuals meet it by having one of the 4 criteria that are listed, so that's not unusual. It's worked really well for us in the area of health science. We do not have any teacher prep institutions in Nebraska for health science, so we have a lot of retired or part-time health science individuals, everything from registered nurses to retired doctors who are actually providing instruction in our schools based on the career ed teaching permit. It's also worked well for us in welding, where we have individuals from the industry who will come up to the school and teach welding for a period or 2 a day. So it's really about getting that industry individual into the classroom. We offer Jumpstart, which is a 4-day training for the career ed permit holders. It's kind of teaching 101, if you will. So it works pretty well for us in terms of giving them an opportunity to think a little bit about what it's going to be like when they get into that classroom. And then we also work with the school administrators to make sure they're prepared to provide the assistance needed to make that work. So that's with the pure industry-based individual who doesn't want a full-time teaching permit or a teaching career, but is interested in helping us out in the classroom. Slide talks about a program called Transition to Teaching, or T2T. This is one where it's an individual from industry that has a bachelor's of science or a bachelor of arts degree, and they have decided they would like to pursue teaching as a full-time career. So you can read through some of the things there in terms of what they do. They have an opportunity to participate in 3 online modules, which amounts to 18 hours of professional education within their first 3 years. If they get that complete, they're then eligible to receive a full teaching certificate. This has worked really well in some of our areas. In agriculture, for example, if they graduate with a degree in animal science or ag economics, but they didn't have the teaching option, or in business, we have a lot of people from the business side or the finance side who have used the transition to teaching program, gone back, completed those 18 hours online. They can actually teach while they're completing the modules. So they're supervised by a transition to teaching mentor as well as the local administration. So there's supports built in. They do participate in Jumpstart. It's worked really well. We've got several teachers who had a great start, and they have continued on. Success rate on this one is probably in the 80% plus, just because of the intentionality of the program. So this one has worked really, really well for us. The third one then is on the next slide. Really is our partnership with our post-secondaries. And we have a lot of our post-secondary institutions that are willing to provide dual credit instruction into those schools. And so we created what's called the Post-Secondary Dual Credit Teaching Permit. The Nebraska law requires that all teachers in Nebraska schools have a teaching certificate. So those first two ways allowed that. Interestingly, post-secondary do not have such a standard. They can be more industry-based as long as they can meet higher commission or whatever their standards are for employment. Looked at creating the post-secondary dual credit teaching permit that basically says if that individual has met the qualifications of that college, then they are eligible to teach in the high school in that subject or in that content area. So that has worked out really well. We have over, actually, because of the nature of our state, we have over 300 courses that are now offered on a dual credit basis that are current tech ed courses. So it's really been popular. We have this last year, probably, last that I looked, was a little over 5,000 students who are taking advantage of dual credit career and technical education in the state. So very popular. Also has opened up the opportunity for is the bottom part of that slide, where we certainly have brand new connections between secondary and post-secondary teachers from a professional development perspective. So because we've got the new linkage between post-secondary instructors teaching in the high school, they now have the opportunity to build those relationships, and post-secondary institutions are coming to us and saying, would you let us provide professional development for your teachers in this area? It's allowed us to really do a better job of aligning our curriculum between secondary and post-secondary programs, so that works out really well. The other thing that's interesting is our colleges are now putting together mobile labs. One of our issues, as we pointed out, was the geography of the state. So Western Nebraska Community College, for example, has a mobile lab that's welding. They have one in health science. They have one on energy. There's semi-trailers that they have retrofitted them into a school. So in addition to getting maybe some online instruction through a dual credit, or maybe it's even face-to-face, now have the mobile lab with the equipment that the students can have some laboratory experience. Even though it's limited, at least it's an opportunity for us to really strengthen the relationship between secondary and post-secondary education. So those are the three options that we've really looked at from the teacher shortage perspective. So some other solutions then in terms of the industry expert. One of our opportunities we had is to partner with the Nebraska Industry Councils. 4 years ago, Nebraska did a major economic study conducted by Battelle that identified that we really needed to pull together key individuals from key sectors to provide guidance and to help us deal with issues of worker supply, policy oversight, etc. So we identified industry councils. They are collaborative between the Departments of Education, Labor, and Economic Development. You see the list of the list of councils that we have in place. The Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics is the oldest one. Manufacturing, very, very successful. We have about 25 CEOs of manufacturing firms that serve in that one. The Construction Council is different because it represents, the people who serve on that council are representatives of all the associations. So the home builders are there, the general contractors are there, the heavy equipment operators are there. So really very effective in terms of representing the construction industry. We have a brand new one in the business administration area that's under development that will also have some emphasis around information technology. And the biosciences one is interesting. It's BioNebraska, and it deals with the biosciences in all three, agriculture, environment, and health science. So these tools have been really effective in terms of bringing business together to talk. So on the slide, you can see a little bit about what they do. This is some of the success that we've had. They've helped us with standards, programs of study, relaunching our work-based learning program right now. They've been intimately involved in helping us design the new continuum of workplace experiences, as well as working with us on a lot of new materials from that perspective. Some of the other things have been mentioned earlier. A couple of unique ones that have come out of this industry council that we've been very excited about, and that's with the teacher externships. We have a couple of companies in the STS area that are actually providing pre-service opportunities. So they're providing internships for skilled and technical science teachers so that they can work in their plants. They can understand everything from